One of the tools in learning web development is a sample API, something you can test your front end against. In this course, we are building a sample API that can be used both locally and via the web. Along the way, we're going to learn how to build and deploy a minimal API in C#. When we're done, we will have built an API with sample data that is documented, has health checks, simulates slowdowns and errors, and is deployed both as a Docker container and as a web application on a virtual private server. The end result will be a tool you can use in testing your own apps. In this lesson, we're going to add a JSON file with sample data, load that data into memory, and then create two endpoints to give that data to the user. We'll also create filters for that data so that the user can get just the entries they're looking for. Let's get started. So here's our API, and what we're going to do is start off by creating a folder called data. And in here, we're going to create a file called coursedata.json. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm going to put in this JSON file some data from the website that I use. So IamTimCorey.com right now is powered by basically one big JSON file. And all the course data goes in that JSON file, and then we just display that on the site. It's a very fast way to display our data. We don't update it that often, therefore it's not a big deal to even make some changes to that JSON file every once in a while. We don't need a full database for this. And for this app, we want to have a JSON file because we want that to be self-contained. We're going to put this whole API into a Docker container. I don't want to have to worry about having both SQL and my web server in a Docker container. That makes the Docker container bigger. Let's just put it into a JSON file since this is a sample API. We're not worried about having data that's mutable, that can be changed. We're not worrying about storing data long-term. We're resetting this data all the time. It's not about storing data. It's about just giving the user some samples to work with. So what I'm going to do is go grab that JSON file, and I'm going to paste that data in here. So what this data is, let's go to the top here. This is my course data. Now I've trimmed out some stuff so it's a little bit easier and a lot less noise for you. But every record has an ID. We mark if the course is a pre-order or not. We have the Game Development Master Course right now, which is a pre-order. The course URL, if you want to go right to that course. The course type, which is training, master course, lab. There's legacy courses and so on. We also have the course name, the number of lessons in that course, the number of hours in that course, the description, the image for the course, the price in US dollars. By the way, if you ever see a price in US dollars on my site, just note that the actual price you pay is based upon that number. So it may be a totally different number because if VAT is added or taxes or something else, you'll see a different number. I base all of my pricing off of the US dollar price though. So I'm not trying to pull any funny business or change prices per zone or something like that. We also have a course preview link. So basically we're going to use this data as just sample data pulled down. We have different types of data here. We can pull images, we can go to URLs, we can filter by type of course, or we can grab the course by ID. So with all of that, that's our sample data. It's all we need to know in order to build out our data. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to create a model for this data. So I'm actually going to copy one record. So one JSON object, and then we're going to create a new file. So I'm going to say Control-Shift-A. Actually, I'm already in data. Let's back up one. There we go. I'm going to say models. And then I'm going to call it course model. And in here, what I have to do is after the course model, not in it, after it, I'm going to say edit, paste special, paste JSON as classes. That pastes the entire thing in. And then I just get rid of the bottom curly brace and the top through the top curly brace. And now it's in the course model. Now, the way I've done this here, the JSON model is, lowercase. It's a camel case. I'm going to change all these to be the proper casing. I can also have the quick actions refactoring do it for me, but this works. So it's not a big deal, but it's something I want to make sure we match correctly inside of our code. It's not a big deal to change. You should change it though. Sorry, I'm fighting with IntelliSense here to give me the spot to highlight. Okay, so now we have our model. Pretty simple, right? We just, bing, bang, boom, done. And we are going to mark these strings as nullable because of the fact that we should either have them required or mark them as nullable. And actually, I believe, and let's just look through our data to be sure, but I believe that all of this data is always populated. There's never, even if it was not populated, it would be an empty string. So therefore, we can actually mark these as required instead of marking them as nullable. So there we go. Now we're saying that, hey, this will not be null. It's going to be populated at some point. So we're kind of obeying the laws of nullability. Okay, so now we have our model. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our data folder. I'm going to put it in the data folders, even though we have our JSON data here too. I'm going to put a new class. We're going to call this course data.cs, and this is going to load the course data. So I could put this, whoops, there we go. I could put somewhere else or move the data somewhere else, I guess, but I'm going to put them both together. I think that's fine. It's up to you to decide if you want to do that or not. We're going to start off with saying we have a public list of course model. It's going to add the using directive for that. We're going to call it courses, and it's going to be a get and a set. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to, and actually we can say mark this as a private set. And now in our constructor, which will be empty constructor, meaning no parameters here, we're going to set up a way to load this course data. Now, first I want to set up some options for loading the data. So equals new JSON serializer options. That's going to add the using directive for system.text.json. And in here, we're going to say property name case insensitive equals true. And the reason why is because when we load this data, notice that it's normal JSON format, right? Which is camel case. So lowercase I, lowercase c. The first letter of the word is lowercase, and then we have our proper casing after that. Well, we use Pascal casing, which is the capital first letter of every word in C#. That's our format. So if we say property name case insensitive, this is for loading data in, then we're going to make sure that we say, hey, if you see a name that's the same except for casing, don't worry, that's the correct name, and map it over. So that's going to be what we use to load our data. And then we're going to say string file path equals, and we're going to use path.combine here. And the reason why is because path.combine will work across different platforms. So the way that Windows does pathing versus Linux or Mac is different. So if we don't get our slashes in the correct direction, it won't work on one of those platforms, either Windows or Linux. So that's a problem for us because I'm currently running on Windows, but when I deploy it to a Docker container, it will be on Linux. And when I deploy it to a virtual private server, it will be on Linux. So therefore, I have to get my paths correct. So I'm going to start with directory.get current directory. And then we're going to say data, make sure that the capital D it's capital D, not lowercase d. That will, let's put this down different lines, that will cause problems because our folder is capital D, and some operating systems have case sensitivity when it comes to the folder names and file names. So make sure you match those up. And then the last thing here is going to be course data.json. Again, case sensitive, so make sure you match that casing. So that's going to be the path to our file. And these are the options for serializing our data, or deserializing actually. So we're going to say string JSON equals file.read all text and pass in the file path. And then we're going to say courses equals JSON serializer dot deserialize to a list of course model. And then we're going to pass in our JSON data we just loaded and the options saying here's how to map over those things. And then we're also going to say, or give me a new list. And what that, let's unpin this here for a minute. What that or new, what that does is make sure that if we didn't have data or didn't deserialize over, this is nullable. If it's null, then it's give us an empty list to put in the courses. That way, courses is not null. Okay, so now what happens is whenever we load or instantiate this course data class, it's going to populate this list of course model from our JSON file. So that's all this does is it takes our JSON file, maps it over to a list of course model called courses, and gives us this one property we can access outside of this class. So with that in place, now what we're going to do is we're going to add this to dependency injection. That way, whenever we want course data, we just ask for course data. So let's come back over here. We're going to go to our startup and go to dependencies config. And in here, we're going to say builder.services. We're going to say add transient. Now, why transient? Because really, we only have to load this once, right? Because that list is never going to change. Well, that is true, except for the fact that you can change a list, right? A class could delete entries from a list. They could add entries to a list, and that would change how the list looks. So in order to combat that, every time you ask for a list, I'm going to give you a new instance of it. That way, we're sure that you haven't made any modifications, or if you did, we just throw them away, essentially. That means we can allow methods to act on the list. We could have them add new records to that list. Not a problem, because as soon as you're done operating on that list, the next time you ask for that list, it's a new instance of it. So add transient course data. Again, that adds a using directive for us. So I'm not sure why I added that using directive, but we can get rid of it. So now what we have here is our course data is in our services. We have access to it when we are ready, which is actually right now. So let's go ahead and start working on our, let's close all this down actually. So close all tabs. Let's start working on our endpoints. And again, we're going to map a new set of endpoints. So let's map a new set of endpoints called courses, our course endpoints. Like so. And we're going to do the same exact thing we did here with root endpoints. So we'll mark this as static. And then the way we called this was add root endpoints. So we're going to say public static void add course endpoints. Okay. And web application, we're going to call it app. Just sort of mapping it correctly or the same way every time, like so. So this, if we were to copy this and paste it back into program.cs, would still work the same way. Same thing here. if we copy and pasted it, it would still work the same way. So now what we're going to do is map out our endpoints. And let's start simple. So we're going to say app.mapGet, and we'll say this is slash. We can do slash API slash or just do slash courses. Since we're calling this the sample API, I don't know we need to do the sample API.com slash API slash something. We could just say the sample API.com slash courses, and that would give us the courses endpoint. I think we're going to land there, so we'll start there. So now we can say, let's do our arrow function here, and we're going to clean this up more as we go, but we're going to ask for the course data. We'll call it data. And then we're going to say return data dot, which let's go ahead and do our control dot to add the using directive here. So data dot courses. Okay, that's a really simple endpoint. We're going to do a whole lot more than that, but let's call this good for now and go to our program.cs and say app.add course data endpoints. And again, add a using directive for this, which we don't need that. What we need to do is add course endpoints. Should be spelled correctly. We have to add a this in front of the web application or make it an extension method. There we go. That should be good. So now we can start this again. Actually, let's stop this real quick because I want to actually go to my properties launch and set browser launch is true. And let's not put a URL for now. Well, let's do it. Launch URL is going to be scalar/v1. That way we always start in scalar. We may, turn that off after a little bit, but for now, we're going to turn that on. So there's our launch. We have courses now. So you have courses. We can say request. We hit send, and we get the JSON converted into int32. So course length in hours. So it's saying, hey, we got a problem here. The JSON value converted to an int32 for length in hours. Aha, I know why that is. Let's go back here. Always read your error messages. They're important. So if we come over here and look at our course model, we have course length in hours, and it's an integer. If we come to our course data and look, you see course length in hours is 5, 14, 4, 6, 18, 14, 38. So looking good, right? Until you get down, let's kind of keep scrolling here. Right there. There's our problem. 2.5. Is 2.5 an integer? No, it is not. It is, in fact, a double. So when we did the copy and paste, what we did was we selected the very first record. And what Visual Studio does is it infers what the various typing is based upon the value it sees. So if it sees double quotes, it says, okay, that's a string. If it sees false or true, it says, okay, that would be a Boolean. If it sees a whole number, it says integer, which this is a whole number. But it can have an integer value, or I'm sorry, a double value or a decimal point. So therefore, we need to change that to a double, not an integer. Also notice down here for price in US dollars, that's to the whole number. We don't do pennies for our courses. We don't do $49.99 or something like that. So it's always going to be rounded to the, or not rounded, but it's going to be the whole number value. So that's $49 US. So we're going to use an integer for that. So let's try this again. And if we come down to courses and we say test request and send, we now get a proper set of data back. We get all of the courses back. And we can see that, yes, 1 through 31 are all here. So there's all of our data. Notice this last one here does not have a preview link, so it says null. All right, cool, that's fine. Although preview link, if it says null, that's not ideal because we don't actually store null values. Although it may come back as an empty string. So let's just take a peek at that real quick just to verify. Come down to the last record. Course preview link is null. Let's change that to an empty string. There we go. So it's an empty string, not a null value. That way we can be correct in not storing nulls in the required fields. Okay, so we've got the start of our data. We've got the start of our setup, but I want to go well beyond this for our endpoints. First off, let's create a private static, and we're going to, let's go with private static iResult and say load all courses, like so. And we'll say course data called data. And then we will return that course data. And we're going to have to wrap this in a results.ok, like so. And then we can say, instead of doing all the work here, we can just say load courses. That way, our add course endpoint, all it does is add the endpoints. It doesn't add the endpoints and build the endpoints. That way, we're kind of separating out our code so that we can have another call like app.map get, and we'll say /courses/ and then we can say this is ID. Get the right ending there. And then we'll do the same thing. We're going to say load course by ID. And we'll create another method down here, private static iResult called load course by ID. And we're going to pass in course data called data and an integer called ID. Right? So now we can do something similar to this, but we'll grab we'll say return results.ok. And for right now, we're expecting these to work. So that's why we're saying results.ok every time. Data.courses. We can do single or default. So we'll return the single or default where we'll say x.id equals ID. So it's going to return one record. And yes, we are expecting that record to be there. We can kind of, expand out this code to do some error checking first and throw the correct exception if not. But let's just create these two. So now we have two methods that do work. One just loads all the courses. That's this one right here. One loads just one specific course. Now let's run this again, and let's look at what happens when we look at our course endpoints. So we have courses, which, by the way, still works, or it should. There we go. There's all the courses. But now we can also come down here to courses by ID. Let's run this. We have to pass in an ID. That's required. So let's pass in an ID of 5. We hit send. We get just the 5, and that's the web API from start to finish. Ironic, I didn't actually plan that out, but cool. There's the course, 18 hours on how to build out a web API in .NET, including minimal APIs like we're doing here. So that's one course. We can ask for one course and get just that one course. We can do the same thing again. And there's the Postman clone app course. So with that, we now have 2 endpoints we can start playing around with and making better. So that's how I would do the mapping, is to have one method do all the mapping, and then the private methods do the actual work for each of the endpoints. So let's start off with a little bit of tweaking on this method. So we don't have to do a whole lot. We can just cut this out temporarily and put this into a variable. We just put into a variable like this. We can say var output equals, and we're done. And now we can say if output is null, because it's a nullable file, so it's nullable, and that would be the default value. If it's null, then what we're going to do is return results, if I spell it right, results dot not found. And we could pass in a the value that we didn't find, but I think that not found is just fine, because what you're saying is, hey, you asked for course number 35. We don't have that. We have through 31, so therefore we didn't find it. So not found. Otherwise, what we'll do is return the output. Okay, so now if we test that real quick, just to make sure we have something correctly working, let's go ahead and go to our ID endpoint, and we're going to request it, and we're going to pass in, let's just pass in 35, and hit send, and we get nothing back. We get a 404 not found. Let's change that to 31 and hit send, and we get a 200 OK, but I don't see my values here. So let's find out why. So let's go back out of here, close this out, and look at why we're not returning this value correctly. Let's go ahead and put a breakpoint at the end here. So as soon as we're done, actually, let's just put it right there as well before we return it, and just take a peek at what that value might be. So we're going to give a good value here. So we're going to come down here and say, again, we knew it didn't work before, so let's hit 31. And when we mouse over our output looks correct. So we have a results.ok, and we're passing in the output. When we do, oh, there, it does work. So let's find out if we do 35 and hit send, we get a 404. Let's go back to a 31 and hit send, and now it is thinking about it. It's thinking about it. Let's hit. Interesting, that kind of, because we are actually at the breakpoint. Let's clear that. Hit continue, and now it works. Okay, so let's just, again, go back to 35. Nothing, it's 404. Go back to 31 and hit send, it works. So it was just a glitch. I had to restart Visual Studio, or actually restart just the Kestrel. So for whatever reason, it didn't work before, but now it does. Programming is fun. But that is our pretty much rock solid code. It's going to look up the data. If it doesn't find something, it says return not found. Otherwise, it says it found something. Now, if for whatever reason we had an exception when we loaded this data, or when we try to access courses, maybe it didn't find it for whatever reason, then that might throw a different exception, but probably not, since even courses, if we didn't find any courses, it just returns an empty list, which would allow us to still say single or default. So this probably should not ever fail. But if we ever find we have more error checking to do, we can definitely do that in the future. But I think this is pretty much rock solid as it is. So now let's address this method, the load all courses, because I want to do more than just load all the courses. I want to be able to say, yeah, let's load all the courses, but let's filter by course type, or let's do a search on the courses. So let's enable both of those options. To do that, I'm actually going to move on different lines so we can have multiple. I'm going to say a nullable string that is course type. And I say nullable because of the fact that if you don't provide something, I don't want you to throw an exception. I want you to be able to run still as you are without sending any extra data or query parameters along with us. And these will be query parameters. I'm also going to say a nullable string that is search. Okay, so those two values are now going to help us filter down this list of courses. So I'm going to start by grabbing this course data. So I'm going to say var output equals the course data, and I'll return output at the end. There we go, output. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check for if there is a course type specified. So I'm going to say if string.is null or white space on the course type equals false. Now, just so you know, I could have put the bang character or the exclamation point in front, but I find that this is really easy to miss. And so you read this as, hey, if it's null, then do this. And that's not true. It's the opposite of null or white space. So therefore, by saying false, it is really very in your face what's happening here. It's much easier to see. And so I tend to do that. You don't have to. Not a problem. If you don't do it that way, it's just a personal preference. Now, I could do a filter here and say where, and then put that into a new variable which overwrites output. We don't have to do that. An easier way of doing this is say output.remove all. And we're going to remove all where we have a match. Okay, so we're going to say, let's start with an X, and we'll say string.compare x.course type. And we're going to say the course type, and then we're going to say string comparison. So string.comparison, and I'm going to choose, I'm going to say ordinal ignore case. And what it's going to do, let's unpin this so you can kind of see a bit more of it. What it's going to do, wow, it's still super long. Let's actually bring these into separate lines. This is going to compare these two values, the course type from the model or from the list and the course type you've passed in. And it's going to say if it is not equal to 0. Okay. And what that will do is it will compare and say, hey, you've asked for a master course and this says lab. Well, those are not equal. Therefore, it's going to give it either a -1 or a +1 value, which is not 0. Therefore, remove that one. But if you say master course here and master course here, as long as it's spelled the same, doesn't have to worry about casing as far as uppercase, lowercase, or all the rest. If those two are the same, it's going to return 0, which means we're going to keep it because we're not going to remove it because we're only removing the ones that don't equal 0. So that will remove all the entries from the list that aren't a match. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove all of the course types that don't match the course type being passed in. Let's just see this in action so we can see how it works, and then we'll come back and do more. So under courses, let's test this. Notice that we can pass in course type or search. We're going to pass in a course type. We're going to say master course. Now again, casing doesn't matter, but I did all lowercase. I hit send, and now notice that we have 12, 14, and 23. We have 3 master courses, ID 12, 14, and 23. So the first one is C# master course. The second one is web dev master course. The third one is our game development master course. So all 3 of those are master courses. Notice that when you come down here and look at the course type, You can see right here, course type says master course. It's a little hard to see when I highlight it in black, but that is the course type we're looking for. Therefore, we've filtered to only that course type. If I were to change this to say legacy, these are courses that still have valuable information, but they are a bit older now, and so we don't actually sell them. They're only in the DevPass. For those of you who need kind of that, like if you're working on not the latest thing, if you're working on .NET Framework or something else, these courses would be great for that, but it's not the cutting edge stuff. Well, there you go. There's the legacy courses in our catalog. So this allows you to filter now by type. If I take this off and I were to hit send, well, now we have all the courses again. So if you don't pass something in for course type, you don't filter by course type. If I were to pass in test and hit send, I get no results because there are no course types of type test. So there we go. That's how that operates, which means that we've now put one filter in place, which is removing anything that's not the course type you asked for if you ask for a course type. Let's do the same exact thing, but for search. So if string.is null or white space, search equals false. Again, same principle here. I like patterns in my code. I want to see the same thing done the same way every time. That way it's predictable, it's understandable. So now we can say output dot remove all, same pattern. Let's do our fat arrow and say, I'm going to do the not here and say not x dot course name dot contains search string stop doing that, Tim, comparison dot ordinal ignore case. And then let's do an and put a second line here. We'll indent it. Not x dot short description dot contains search string comparison dot ordinal ignore case. So what have I done here? Well, again, I'm removing all. If it's not found in the course name and it's not found in the description. So again, you're thinking about removing. So it's the opposite of what you initially think. We're not finding the ones where it matches. We're finding the ones where it doesn't match and removing those. So that's why you also use an and. If we were saying add all, well, then we'd say find where it matches in the course name or in the description. But since we're removing, we can't find in either the course name or the description. So if it's in either place, so if it's not in the course name and it's not in the course description, then remove it. Okay, yes, going the opposite direction sometimes messes with my brain and it makes it hard to think through. Sometimes I write it down on a piece of paper and I make sure that all the different cases match up correctly. And once I've done all of that, then I test it. So let's go ahead and test this. So we've got our course endpoints. Let's do a test request, and we're going to search for, let's search for web. Hit send. And now we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a lot. We have Bootstrap. We have Prove It C# web development. We have building a suggestion app. We have Azure, Web Development Master Course, Web API, and Blazor. So yeah, we have a lot of web content in the catalog. Let's maybe filter this by SQL. Hit send. Again, Accelerate SQL. We have Database DevOps, and we have Building a Build Time app. So 3 different courses that have SQL somewhere in there. So like building a build time app, that's the course name, but the course description says SQLite. Which, yes, SQL is contained inside of SQLite, therefore it flagged it. Then we have SQL Server for database DevOps, and of course, Microsoft SQL in the Accelerate course. So there's our filter, but now we can say we've got a training course, an Accelerate course, and a legacy course. If I were to add in a course type of just training and hit send, now I'm filtering by both the course type and by my search criteria, and I get one result back. So we now have course type working independently as well as together with a search. We have search working independently as well as with course type. And I can blank both of these out and get the entire list. Always make sure you can get the entire list when you run this. That way you don't accidentally filter things unintentionally, okay? But that now gives us two endpoints to work with. We have an endpoint that loads all the courses. We have an endpoint that loads just a course by ID. So if you're searching for something, you'd load all courses and do a search or filter by course type. Once you found the course you wanted, you could go back to it by loading it by its ID. All right, so there's our endpoints for testing an API. And really that's the kind of the heart of our sample API is these two endpoints so that you can load data on a page, you can see it coming back, you can filter it, you can sort it, and all the rest. Now, we're not done yet because there's some things kind of in our way of making this a great sample API. One of them is cores. If you're not familiar with cores, we're going to do that in the next lesson. But what that's going to do is it's going to say, hey, you can't call this if you're on a different URL. We're going to allow any URL to call our API. So we're going to address how to implement cores in this sample API in a way that works so that anybody can call this from anywhere and not have a problem. Okay? So until then, thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.